we'd talk about, things that were going on in the world in these discussion groups that were after dinner in each cabin every night. And, so they were about current events, what was going on, and, President Kennedy being assassinated, and racial strife that was beginning to spread across the country. So we began to at least acknowledge those, and it was the first time a lot of us really dealt with those issues. And of course, the other thing that was going on was popular music, and the Beatles were just coming to America, in the beginning, in the mid '60s or later. So all day long, there was music playing. We had an old phonograph turntable, and there'd be people would bring their albums, probably 78s or whatever they were. I don't even know what they were, but there'd be music playing over the loudspeaker, which I looked at the loudspeaker today. The one we had was about 10 times that size. It's old ones, but you'd have a chance to be out on the lake in a sailboat with a few friends and be listening to music playing. And as teenagers, we would think there really wasn't a better place to be, and I don't think there was.
You speak of music. The music back then was we would plaster. Every time I hear "Light My Fire" by the Doors, I think of Camp Segowea, because the counselors would. All the counselors would just run out of their cabins with the brooms and start, singing "Light My Fire." But you talk about news items and how they affected us, and it's interesting, like he said, we didn't have the information process that we have today. If we got any news at all, it was from a newspaper that a counselor brought back with him on his day off, and that's how we heard about anything going on in the world. Quite frankly, I didn't know about Woodstock until I came home. I got home and they were talking about this great concert. Right where Mike is standing and John is sitting is where we watched the first man walk on the moon in 1969. And the other one that comes up was the Ted Kennedy's Chappaquiddick. That happened. I just remember reading about it on the some newspaper that somebody left. But that's how we got our news. That was it.
I remember John Fisher and Bruce Barmack had a little TV, and they would hook it up when there was something going on. I believe that we watched some kind of space travel shuttle landing. I don't remember what it was. But what I do remember is that John and Bruce liked to stir the rivalry of the New York teams against Boston. And they would come down with the baseball scores. And Bruce and John were both from Connecticut, and a majority of their campers were from Poughkeepsie, and there was a lot of very healthy, fun rivalry that way. And I remember that being a really good thing.
I was going to say, back in, I don't remember when, but there was that big blackout that went from Canada through New York City, and it was during a session break, and I know I was in Poughkeepsie, blacked out, and our friends were in New York City, and it was insane, and you couldn't go anywhere, and then we came back after session break to find out Camp Segowea was one of the few places that did not actually lose power, so it definitely was the place to be at that point.
Oh, I have one other thought. After 9/11, in that following year, campers asked consistently if something went wrong, could they come here? Would this place be here? And they felt like this was a safe place. And that came from them, not from any adult.
The isolation of this place was very much what nurtured the relationships that went on within it. Now, of course, in my day, there were no screens on the cabin. There was no electric. We had double bunk beds. We had no television. There was no news except what might have been announced by the camp director. But the very fact that we were here in our own community, we created the news. We created a lot of what happened in our community. I think there's something special about that. Instead of being where you were in your home in a city, constantly bombarded with news blasts, the lack of it, to me, was great. When I was a counselor, I felt the same way.
I think that isolation contributes to camp having its own culture. So I know we've kind of talked about, a lot of these have touched on camp culture already, but if there are additional comments, people want to talk about what camp culture was like. I know it's a broad topic, but for when you were here.
I can talk about I guess a result of the culture, and that was what happened out here on the corner at the end of teen camp session. You know, sessions were just 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks of August. But nearly everybody would be hugging and crying out there, and many of the people hadn't known each other 2 weeks before. And so a lot of things happened, you know, there's sports and a lot of activities and just a wonderful environment that bonded people together so quickly. And that was, for me, that was always the teen camp culture, that it provided that kind of experience. It was really pretty amazing.
I think kind of to go off of that, one thing that we could see every time, because we had 2-week sessions as well, and so that day that the kids would come in, where's my TV? Where am I? What am I doing here? This is going to be awful. And by Sunday at chapel in the middle of the session, they're crying, and they had that safety to cry. It was like cleansing tears, not the homesick tears, but you can just be comfortable being in your own skin here no matter what that is, and then never ever wanting to leave and coming back as much as you possibly could. And I think another big thing that we had was the idea of LBE, or to lead by your example. So from our camp director all the way down to the kids, it wasn't you go do this, it was, well, you've watched me do it for so long and you know that this is just what you do when you're here. And it was respected enough that you could kind of call each other out without it being a personal attack. Everybody just knew, oh, LBE, and you knew that you kind of had to pull it together and lead a better example.
Any other comments on camp culture? Okay.
I just wanted to mention I have with me that I found in the attic a 1963 list of all the campers, and of that year, there were 93 of us at the co-ed camp. If anyone wants to see that list, you'll be as surprised as I was to find it originally.
Thank you. Last question before we're going to move on to questions from the audience. Well, I guess I have two more. But starting with the LBE, which starts with the director. So if you can say a few words about who was the director when you were at camp and what they were like. We'll be talking about some people on the panel.
I just spoke, I could say. Yeah. Well, Dick Thomas was the director of the camp when I was here. He was also director of the boys department. And it was the program he ran there at the Poughkeepsie Y that got me here. He was a fantastic director. Don Asher was director during the years that I was a counselor at the boys camp, and Dean Temple, who was a phenomenal person in the co-ed years. The most phenomenal thing I remember about him is a group of us went up to him and said, look, we'd like to swim around the lake. And he said, well, I'll let you do that, but I'll be in the lead boat. He was in the lead boat, had a lifeguard with him, and a group of us, we had no swim vests, and he took us all around the lake. And he would stop. You know, when you're on a hike, you wait for the last to come and start again. That's how we did it. We swam all around the lake. Of course, I was young and thin then.
Just a word about Dean Temple. When I knew him, I think he must have been in his maybe late 60s, but he would swim across the lake himself nearly every morning, and there was a ritual called soap dip. John, you probably remember that, but you know, before breakfast, and probably it's not environmentally sensible today, but people had their floating ivory soap and would go down off the swim dock that's now down by the boat area and take a soap dip. And Dean would be the first one down there, and he was talk about leading by example. He would be the one out there. So he was quite a man, influenced hundreds and hundreds of young people, and was an amazing role model.
So I had, of the directors that I can remember, I had Stuart the first year I was here, Kat the following year, I believe, and I can't remember one of them, and then this year I have Josh. And so the first year I was here, we tried to keep a lot of the same traditions. Like, we actually did have soap dips too, really early in the morning, and that was really fun, except we'd use, I think it was Dr. Bronner's. It was like biodegradable soap or something, and it was good for the water. And so we would do that, and there was a polar bear swim for kids that would want to get up and swim in the lake really early. And as the directors changed, because we didn't have one for too long of a period of time, a lot of the things stayed the same because of the returning campers, who were able to, well, the returning campers and staff that were able to say what they needed to say and keep the same traditions here. So.
When I started, Skip Falk was the director. He was in his early 20s. He got a lot of help from Bob Gaddis, who was on the camp committee. He had his hands full. He was a wonderful man, and really excited about being here. Really loved camp. And after him was John Fisher, who's in the back, who I always wanted to be, in a sense, and tried to work up to be as good a director as he was. After him was Bruce Barmack, who was John's assistant, and who brought just a fantastic program to camp, much of which we still do today, or you still do today. And after that was Jack Stasio, and after that was me.
Well, Beth. My camp director my whole 10 years here was Beth Hodes-Kalowski. And I mean, we could really take up too much time with this, but I would say, in a nutshell, I definitely call her my hero. To me, a lot of camp is Beth. It was a place where no matter who you were, you could always have somebody there to sit next to and talk to if you wanted, or there was always a safe space for you to kind of do your own thing if you needed to. We used to joke that she was Mama Bear because she watched her cubs, she knew everything that was going on, and yet, similar to the kids, you had your choices that you could make, and you would know what would happen if you made the right ones or the not so right ones. And you know it by breakfast when you walked in that morning. But yeah, so the safety and the respect and the just investment, and the reason why I think many of our volunteers and these friends of Segowea that we all can't get away from here lies in the culture that Beth had created.
The camp director, why I was here at camp, was my dad. So, and he was the only one that I had. So basically, I don't know what else to say other than it was a good time. The gentleman over here talking about the morning dip, as we called it, and soaping up and stuff like that, that brings back a good memory. And also, you toweled off real fast and got dressed quickly. And then up here, another thing that I remember was Visitor Sunday was always a special breakfast. And it was crumb cake, something along that line, hot cocoa, scrambled eggs. I'm trying to think. No potatoes. Anyhow, that's kind of some of the stuff that I remember.
We did that on Sunday, so when Mom says, "What'd you have for breakfast?" you had a big list of things to say.
And I just wanted to say I wasn't here around when Beth was director, but I'm good friends with her son. And a lot of the alumni that I know and a lot of the people that have come back have always said how good of a job Beth has done as being director. So as these directors that I've had in the past, I kind of imagined that they would try to follow Beth's example if they knew who she was. But yeah.
I want to acknowledge another teen camp director, and his name is Joe Cravino. And Joe was a youth director at the Poughkeepsie YMCA in the late 60s, I believe, maybe into the early 70s. And Joe was a camp director here for probably maybe 3 years or so. And I learned a lot from Joe, and he was very kind to me as far as kind of teaching me the ropes, because I was involved with the Y at that point. So I certainly want to mention him.
I just wanted to point out, sitting out there is John Phillips, who probably had one of the longest runs as program director here at Segowea. You can tell us the years. I can't remember. There were so many.
Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just during my course of my years, Don Asher was the camp director, and he was like a father to all of us. He managed all of us, and he did a great job. In 1969, that was my last year, and it was one year that Doug Fricky, I think, was the camp director that year, right? In '69, I think Don was. I don't know what happened, but between Joe and Don, there was one year that was Doug Fricky.
Thank you. So those are the specific questions that we had, and we have some topics to discuss, but I thought maybe we'd change a little bit and see if there are questions from the audience. Maybe you can say it, and then I'll repeat it into the mic.
I don't have a question.
Yep.
I just wanted to share a recollection of Dean Temple.
And I'm going to give you the mic.
A couple of people mentioned Dean Temple by name, and I wanted to pay a tribute to him.